pass it around. Devour.
Never use a literal word.
These guys need to be able to ferret around in there.
I'd say it's
extracted.
Yeah.
Extracted. Talking about charming atmospheric peasants is sort of the wine writer's stock and trade. You want to go to college, you get it off the table, and you start kicking out.
Lift off. On this topic of sort of the compact sommelier, isn't sort of the traditional image of the sommelier the silver taste of vin wearing black tied gentleman sort of towering over the table?
That goes back to the civilian's outmoded notion of what a wine snob is. You know, we're showing what real wine snobbery is. That's the perception. The common civilian perception of wine snobbery is, you know, set in the 1930s or 40s in a Fred Astaire picture where everyone's in tuxedos and the man serving the wine has the shiny taste of vin dangling around his neck.
Right. So nowadays what you're saying is there isn't those trappings. You can find snobs even behind sort of Che Guevara t-shirts.
You can.
Yes.
I mean, the sort of the model today is instead of a tuxedo and a taste of vin, it's a suit. Usually the sommelier is the guy with the fattest tie knot.
The fattest tie knot.
That seems to be the Windsor knot, and it's almost an absurdly large incarnation. That's the fashion right now, but it's going to change.
And that's a compensatory thing.
Yeah. It is a compensatory.
Yeah.
What is it compensating for?
Come on now.
Is it a height?
Let's not dwell on the height. All right. First of all, I'm 5'9". That's right in the meat of the curve. Okay.
You know,
so
secondly,
you say. Yeah.
A lot of wine rooms are very small. Restaurants in New York don't have a lot of space in them, so you kind of it's almost like an evolutionary thing in the same way that like dachshunds are built for scrambling into holes and hunting rodents and so forth.
Right.
Sommeliers are sort of evolutionary. Yes. It's like an evolutionary thing.
But I've been to Jean Georges, and it's a rather expansive space, and yet Bernie's son is very compact.
He's little. Michel Couvreux from Le Bernardin, also very, because all the space is devoted to the money-making area of the restaurant dining room and the little wine room downstairs. These guys need to be able to ferret around in there.
In the big cities, restaurants are all about real estate. It's all about real estate, so you don't want an employee taking up real estate.
That's right.
You know?
Right.
You need them rooting around down there in the little small wine cellar and able to kind of get into small corners.
Chef Moon, obviously the big thing on your plate is sustainable seafood, and we at Devour are concerned about the state of consumption of many things, and we would like to hear what the state of the seafood situation is today. And clearly, there are issues.
There's more than just issues, and that's really my point today. Is it's no longer a discussion; it's cold arms. Do it now or lose it.
Right.
It really is. And we've got history. We've already collapsed a cod industry, North Atlantic cod, sardines, other smaller species that maybe are not as well known, but gone. And there's so many fish that are still being consumed regularly with great, reckless abandon is the way I say it, like Chilean sea bass. I don't get it.
Yeah.
Chilean sea bass is in trouble. It's going to be commercially extinct if we don't stop consuming it the way we do. And there are alternatives. What I'm encouraging people is to look out, step outside the box. I mean, I know the three big ones, it's salmon, tuna, and shrimp. It's something else.
Yeah.
Eat salmon on Monday. Good, no problem. Don't eat it again till another week or two. You know, in between, have some herring.
Right.
Try some sardines. And then you don't eat seafood every day. I don't know. Some people do, but not generally most people.
Yeah.
Mix it up. And that's going to make a big difference. And we've seen also when you lay off of a species, you alleviate the pressure of the demand. They rebound every single time, as long as you didn't mess up their home. You give them a place to reproduce and do their thing, and there's enough food for them.
They can make it come back.
They will.
Yeah.
Nature finds a way.
In the discussion we had earlier, there was talk of some of the methods, one being laying fallow, if you will, portions of the coastline for that very purpose.
Yeah.
Could you talk to that or some of the other practices that you see that are helpful?
Well, laying fallow is aquaculture. That's an aquaculture term. That's not wild. You don't lay fallow anything that's just happening naturally. It's better. It's not the be-all and end-all. Let's rush out. I would approach that with some caution. I still don't put it on my menu because I don't want to confuse my message. Because when there's a fine line, when I was on Give Swordfish a Break, it was North Atlantic swordfish that was endangered. In 5 years, it was going to reach commercial extinction. The Pacific swordfish was in perfectly good shape. It was a sustainable fishery. I couldn't put Pacific swordfish on my menu because it's all swordfish. I heard the word swordfish and it's all swordfish. So laying fallow, farm-raised Atlantic salmon, saying it's good. Well, that's okay if you're in the food industry and you're putting it on your menu, I guess. I can't. Because then what it does is it says it's okay for my guests, my consumers, to customers to go out and continue to purchase and consume that. I try to stay true to my message.
So you really self-edit. I mean, if you are concerned about anything, it's off the menu entirely.
Yeah, if it's extreme.
No, he was picking the cake up at 7 o'clock. I don't have time. I got to go over to the place to get the other thing with the ice and the stuff and everything for the... Let me call you back. Oh, whoa, 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 what are you doing? This isn't a sandwich. What are you doing? Why would you put something like this in your mouth? This is garbage. Don't eat that. What's wrong with you? Do you want a sandwich? Okay, this is what you do. Listen to me. Pay attention. Okay? You start off with nice Italian whole wheat bread. Okay? Then you put some prosciutto. Listen. Prosciutto, mortadella, soppressata. Are you listening to me? You understand? Oh, look over there. Look at me. Prosciutto, mortadella, soppressata, some provolone, and then you top it off with some nice Roma tomatoes. Do you know what a Roma tomato is? Okay? It's a plum tomato. Okay? You ask the guy for plum tomatoes because nobody knows because they're idiots. Look at me. What are you looking at? Then you take that with some basil oil. Garlic, basil, and some olive oil, and you mix it up like a dressing. It's not a pesto. Listen to me, you understand? And you put it on there with some nice salt and pepper, okay? And that's it. And that's your sandwich. Here, take a bite of that. I catch you eating garbage like this again, I'm gonna knock you out, all right? Jesus, so stupid, these people.
One time I wound up in a certain amount of trouble with the head chef of a restaurant I was working at, the Danube restaurant, which was a David Bouley, presently is a David Bouley restaurant, Austrian. We began to bring in a lot of whole animals and were interested in breaking those animals down. So we began to bring down whole lambs and whole pigs from Vermont and various other locations, and eventually we developed a separate facility from the Danube to handle all the carcasses. And it was my job in the middle afternoon to cross Duane Street from the actual restaurant and go over to the kind of meat holding facility and pick out the carcasses that I wanted to work with that day, and then return them to the restaurant like a sack or something. I would just kind of sling these carcasses over my shoulder so I could be seen, walking across the street in midday with 2 pigs and a lamb hanging off my back, which I thought really showed my my one oneness with the product. And this went on for a number of weeks, and slowly but surely all the people that lived in the neighborhood got unpleasantly familiar with seeing the midday transfer of these animals, and so they began to call the restaurant. And one day when I was kind of just about to cross the street and bring all my animals back over to the restaurant, Chef Boulay called me into the office and told me I would have to come up with a different transportation plan for my mise en place for that day.
It's time once again for Lunch with Mia. Today's episode, cottage cheese.
Oh! Get it away from me, please. Just get it away.
This has been Lunch with Mia.
You know, I often think that I have to be like the world's Riesling disciple. There are a lot of people out there who already know it. You love Riesling?
I do.
You have any thoughts about German Riesling?
I'm a fan.
Riesling is really one of the great wine grapes of the world.
That's much closer to French and Italian sort of white.
They normally like to drink whites from the Loire and whites from Bordeaux. And they're not so used to drinking Riesling.
C'est très bon. C'est délicieux.
It's excellent, delicious.
Oh, hi. I didn't see you there. Aren't you a little early? I was just catching up on a little light afternoon viewing to get me in the mood for today's cocktail. And believe you me, this is one that leaves little to the imagination. It's called the Screaming Orgasm.
It's easy to make a splash with this one. You'll need vodka, Irish cream, Cointreau or Grand Marnier, a rocks glass and some ice. Simply layer the ingredients in equal parts into the glass with the ice. But if you get a little messy, I'm sure someone will suck it up for you.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, God, yes! What? Guys have to fake it sometimes, too.
Here at Blue Ribbon, it's 4 p.m. to 4 a.m., and the chefs line up after their restaurants close. What do they want to eat? Bones. Blue Ribbon, bone marrow. Hi, I'm Philippe Newland with Devour TV's Top 50 Dishes New York City, and today we're at Blue Ribbon, and we're going to have Eric Bromberg's signature dish, bone marrow. Come on.
We're going to make highlight of Blue Ribbon menu, which is beef marrow with oxtail marmalade. No bones about it. Philippe is going to love this dish.
Oh my gosh, look at that. Bone marrow. Can you illuminate us on bone marrow? What is this all about?
Well, if you see a dog chewing on a bone, you can see him really working to get that marrow out.
Right.
And humans are no different. So there's some very traditional dishes throughout Italian, French, and different types of cuisines where bone marrow is a highlight of the dish or a component of the dish. And we've just kind of broken that down to make the bones themselves the highlight of the dish.
Front and center. Are they leg bones or?
They're leg bones.
From a cow.
From the knee to the hip.
Okay, so we have the bones, this beautiful homemade challah bread, and then you have something else hiding down here in the bottom of the dish.
Right, and that's kind of our play on an oxtail stew, but it's we take some liberties and we use port as well as caramelized shallots to add sweetness and kind of a couple different layers of complexity to that. So you have the luscious bone marrow itself, which has a rich and fatty texture. You have the bread, which absorbs that that fat a little bit, and then you have the oxtail marmalade, which adds a sweet, and then the fried parsley with kosher salt adds a salt, so you get sort of sweet, salty, fatty, and then that delicious sweetness of challah bread.
Oh, sweet, salty, fatty sounds just fine by me. I see you have these little picks here. I'm gonna pick it out of the bones. Do I spread it on the bread, or how does that? How do you do it?
Certainly, there are a lot of different versions of eating this dish, but if you don't mind, I'll make a toast for you, and you can see how I do it.
Thank you, chef.
Put a little bit of the marmalade on first. Reach in and cut a chunk of the marrow.
Are you sure that's enough, or should I put a little bit more of
you
the
certainly
bone marrow?
Since it's your first try, I was...
Yeah, but I'm not scared. Oh man. The quality of the bread is beautiful. There's sweetness of the carrots with this wonderful meat in the oxtail, and then this gelatinous goodness in the bone marrow, which I'm gonna have to get in here and dig it out. There you go. There's a big hunk of bone marrow. Right. What's the actual preparation? How do you get it to this beautiful state?
Well, we put them in the salted water, and then we change the salt water solution about every 12 to 14 hours.
Okay.
Over 3-day period.
Are you kidding me? It takes 3 days?
3 days to appropriately draw out the impurities.
Okay.
We put them in cold salted water.
Okay.
And bring them to a boil. As it's arriving at a boil, then we turn the temperature down and let them simmer.
Do people come in and say, "Give me the bone marrow"? I'm sure they do.
Absolutely.
And then do you try and convert some people who might not be all that familiar?
You know, we definitely don't push people in a direction they're not comfortable. But we have an awful lot of people who are coming specifically for the bone marrow.
Can I do this? I can just
absolutely
pour it out. There we go. What you have here is bone marrow, folks. Down at Blue Ribbon, it doesn't get any better. Top 50 dishes in New York City. Thanks again. Cheers. Oh man, here I go, more bone. Oh, it's just bone.
So one might say you're focusing, or your passion is for esoterica, but it's not really esoteric. The fact that in Greece they drink Assyrtiko from Santorini, and it's every day on the table, that's not esoteric. No. We just may not know it, but it's unfair to call it esoteric.
Fair.
So how are you selling $50 million worth of wines of that so-called esoteric nature?
Well, it's mixed in, right? Obviously, it's very easy to get to 50, 60 million when you sell $12 million worth of 2000. Well, when you're selling $12 million worth of 2005 futures, right? I mean, it's very funny. I feel like half and half, right? Obviously, we know how to get to business that way, and it's definitely done through the Camuses and the Celayas and the brands that you get the big allocations on those wines as much as you can, and you're able to sell them and the dollars pile up. For me, that's why, I didn't start Wine Library TV for any other reason than I freaked out on my 30th birthday because I didn't feel I was giving enough back, and I felt like my soul wasn't 100% happy. I didn't start Wine Library.
You were giving a lot back. People were coming in your store, and as you said earlier, they were walking out with mixed cases of concerts.
Yeah, the people in New York and New Jersey, right? I felt like there was a different way. I saw new media, and I said, you know what? I've got the personality and the work ethic to do this, to come out with a wine show that could really make a thumbprint, to have a real legacy. To me, I wear a t-shirt all the time that says legacy is greater than currency. It's really the foundation of my thought process, my DNA, my terroir. And I felt like there was this big opportunity that no longer did the big TV studios or a radio station control the voice. And I thought I could create a platform. And that's why I do Wine Library TV. And really, that's where I make the impact on getting people excited about other things. I mean, I did a show on Dolcetto a year ago. I looked the other day. We sell so much more Dolcetto a year now. And you know, the vintages haven't been unbelievable. The Euro's not that great. There's no real reason. It's because people go out and explore. I demand it. You know, I demand it.
But you also have this cult following. These Vaniacs will buy whatever you tell them to buy.
People look at it from afar and go, oh, he's building this cult following. I trash myself at every corner. I yell into the camera, don't listen to a word I say. To me, it's all about the individual palate, and I want to guide them and make them think about new things. You know, I'm pumped that a lot of people tried Le Grind for the first time, you know, a couple weeks ago when I did a big show on it, and like so many people have been emailing me like, thank you, this is something I never would have thought about, and I'm really into it. But for them to, you know, as a matter of fact, we've seen a big decline in the wines that we put on the show that I like in sales-wise, because I think people are starting to get, like, you know, I have a very interesting palate, by the way. I'm very driven by vegetables. You give me English peas, I'm a much happier boy than watermelon or plums. So, you know, I don't think I'm the normal palate out there as it is. I just want people to realize that you just can't drink the same shit. You can't drink a wine.
It's a world of wine, so explore the bloody thing.
Please, for the love of God. I mean, please. And so, you know, I'm punching and kicking and putting myself out there, and really I feel like Captain America's shield, right? I feel like I put myself so much out there that the anti-establishment or the people that don't like that kind of style, I feel like I'm holding off for all the Vaniacs, the rest of the people that intimidate them, that make them feel upset if they, you know, I want people when they taste a wine to refer to it as Spree or Big League Chew or whatever the hell they think it is. I mean, I had a Riesling the other day that tasted like my garden hose. You know, like when you used to drink water out of the garden, that steeliness. I mean, that's what it is. The only thing I care about are really fundamentally what I'm pushing through are two things. Try different things and don't listen to anybody. For example, don't listen to me, don't listen to Parker. You're a wine cool god, right? Somebody that really gets into wine should, in essence, listen to you, but I don't want them to. I want them to be true to themselves. I love New Kids on the Block. You know how...
So you want to admit that?
Absolutely. I love them. I listen to them, and I have no problem with that. And then I listen to serious, respected music. There's time and place. You know, when the Jets get pounded 44-13 and the Patriots beat them and I hate life, sometimes it's fun to have a 19% Zinfandel that beats my face in because I'm mad at the world. I mean, are those wines I want to drink? No. But you know what? Time and place.
In order to cook good food, you just need to use all of your 5 senses. Sight, what looks good, what inspires you to cook. Touch, how does it feel when you're selecting it? How does it feel when you're cooking it? Is it ready? Hearing, what does it sound like in the pan? How fast is it sizzling? Smell, how does it smell in your apartment? What's that aroma like? Taste, the culmination of all the other 4 senses and your hard work put together. That's why I love cooking. Let's get into it. Today's recipe is garlic aioli. It's pretty much the Catalan mother sauce. Alright, let's get into it. Lemon, huevos, olive oil, canola oil, garlic. First thing we're going to do is roughly chop a couple cloves of garlic, which we'll set aside. And while that's happening, we've got our pot of boiling water, which we'll use to blanch 6 cloves of garlic separately. While that's happening, we have 4 egg yolks. We're going to take those egg yolks and add them to our blender. Once they're added to the blender, we're going to bring back some of that raw garlic from before. We'll take a nice pinch, about 1 tablespoon, drop that in, and slowly we're going to emulsify the sauce with canola oil by slowly drizzling that in. And this is super important, how fast you add it in. The yolks are like a sponge, and we want it to absorb the oil. Once that's done, we remove the garlic from the blanching water and set that aside. Now we've got some olive oil, which is the other half of the oil, and we're going to emulsify that slowly into the sauce. Here we've got our garlic, boom, right in, continuing to emulsify it so it's nice and creamy, and a little bit of fresh squeezed lemon juice. That acidity will brighten the sauce. It's nice and smooth there. It coats the back of the spoon and falls off. Let's give it a taste. That's the guy. Perfect. I'm just going to cut a piece of chicken off. Dip it in a little bit of the aioli. To me, it's always kind of amazing every time I make this sauce that you take a little bit of this, one of these, pour in some of this, and you get that without any heat. It's pretty cool. Your girlfriend won't kiss you for at least a month after, though.
George, knock it off. Hey, Gross, why is it that some champagne bottles have a vintage date on them and some others don't?
Non-vintage wines are the bread and butter of all the different champagne houses in the Champagne region of France. That's what they're selling, a brand or a style of wine. Moet is going to be different than Pol Roger, is going to be different than Veuve Clicquot. They have a different style. Vintage champagnes are champagnes that are from a particular year that the champagne house said, this was a great year and we want to reflect this in the bottle. So what happens is when you make a vintage wine, you're also getting wines that are from a better village and a better vineyard. And there's also aging requirements for these different champagnes. A non-vintage champagne has to be aged a minimum 15 months in the bottle that it was fermented in before it can be released into the public. Your vintage dated champagnes have to be aged a minimum 36 months in the cellar prior to being released to the public. So if you see a vintage date on a bottle of champagne, what is happening is that champagne house is telling you, the consumer, that we think we had such a great year in 1990, 1995, 1996, that we want this champagne to express that. Hope you learned something today. I'm John Grossweiler. Always be passionate, never pretentious.
Mark Lobel, and I am fifth generation in the meat business. My family's been in the meat business since 1840, and this is Dad.
Hello everybody. I'm here with Mark to show you a little bit about what we know best.
We've certainly been doing this a long time, so we're going to share our knowledge with you. Here we're looking at a few different pieces of meat. Here we have a short loin, is what is called a short loin of beef that has been aged. And you can clearly see that this short loin and this short loin look completely different, and that's because this has been dry aged. What you're looking at is some of the finest beef in America, and wherever possible, you want to try to get dry aged beef. During the dry age process, the fibers start to break down in the meat, and it enhances the flavor and thus makes it more tender. You'll be in the supermarket or your meat case, you'll see the meat looking like this because the dry age will be cut off. So you'll see a couple of things you want to look for when you're in your supermarket. A couple of tips. First, you want the fat on the meat to be milky white. As you can see, it's a beautiful coat of white. You don't want it to be yellow in color. Another important factor in determining quality of beef is you want to look at the marbleization in the meat, and you want to see the fine streaks, fine pinpoint streaks of marbleization running through the meat. And the grade that will give you the best quality will be prime. And when prime is not available, you should then go for choice. Now the porterhouse steak, this short loin will cut into porterhouse steaks and T-bone steaks. One half of the short loin, you have your strip steak, which you can see right here is your strip steak. And actually, let me turn this around, okay? This will be your strip, or shell steak, or New York steak, or Kansas City steak. And the other side will be your filet mignon. So when cut into one steak, which is great for two, gentleman usually likes a strip and a lady usually likes a filet, will be cut into a porterhouse steak. As you're moving more to the other end of the piece of meat, it becomes a T-bone. And the T-bone, you reach the T-bone when the filet becomes smaller, it becomes a T-bone. Another way to do this is, and here actually we can see a porterhouse steak that is cut from here. And you have the strip on one side and the filet mignon on the other side. You have the fat, which is milky white in color and not yellow, because yellow determines an age of the animal, and if the fat is yellow, it could be an older animal, and your eating experience will not be as pleasant. Also, when we separate the two pieces of meat, take this short loin and we bone out this piece of meat, you have the whole strip on one side and the whole fillet on the other side. So if you take this whole piece of meat out, you get, here's part of the fillet, which is the chateau, will come out of this where you'll cut your filet mignons from. And the other side will give you your New York strips. Okay, now Dad, I turn it over to you for some comments.
Yeah, well, just to add a little bit more to what Mark had contributed to this, very, very little I can add, except possibly to the aging process and what the aging really does. Aging meat is similar to aging fine red wines. You have wines that are aged for 3 months, for 6 months, for 2 years, for 5 years, and the longer it ages and in the proper atmosphere, the better and the richer the flavor. And the same holds true with the aging of beef, whether it be prime or whether it be choice. Prime beef ages much, much better than choice does because it has a thicker covering. It has a little bit more fat on the outside of the meat, which protects the meat itself. So when you literally cut off this black aging part over here, you wind up with a steak looking this fresh and this beautiful. But what this steak has that a regular steak does not have, and that's not been aged, is enormous, rich, robust flavor. Kind of flavor that you had maybe 30, 40 years ago when beef was beef. And that's what we've been able to create now, the beef of 40, 50 years ago today. And that's all done in the aging process and the quality of the beef.
Another thing I'd like to point out, comes to mind, is when you're looking at a piece of meat in your supermarket case, and most people I notice when I observe people shopping in the supermarket always tend to pick out the reddest, the deepest reddest piece of meat. Stay away from that. Your eating experience is not going to be as good. You should really look for something a little pinkish in tone and not as deep red. So that's another important thing to consider when you're shopping in the supermarket or in your butcher.
The real key in purchasing a great steak in a supermarket is to scan the steaks and in the back of your mind know that good steak has to have flakes of fat throughout the meat. It cannot be bright red or it cannot be bright yellow. It needs to have a pinkish tone with a great deal of the marbling, or what we call this fat in the meat. Now mind you, the fat in the meat is not the fat that we worry about. We worry about eating the fat on top of the meat. This cooks out in the cooking process. This fat graining in the meat makes the meat softer and more flavorful. This is the fat that we cut off before we eat it to protect ourselves. Of course, my personal opinion, I would rather have a great steak once a week than a lousy steak 5 times a week.
Only 2%, now we had mentioned previously that this is the finest beef that you can buy. The grade of prime, only 2% of all the beef graded in the United States meets this grade of prime. And then when you start to dry age it, it enhances the flavor even more. But when prime is not available, then you should buy choice.
How to clean round fish. Fresh fish with clear eyes, firm flesh, bright gills. First, make sure all the guts are out. Your fishmonger will usually do this for you, but in case you find yourself in this situation, slice open the belly and pull everything out. Make sure your garbage goes out to the curb that night. Now go ahead and snip off all the sharp fins and go and make your first cut behind the gills towards the head. It makes things a lot easier if you just go ahead and lop the head off altogether. Just make sure to save it for stock. Back to the fillet, just make nice long slices down over the spine. Make sure to angle the knife up a little bit so you don't lose any flesh at the top of the fish. For the other side, just slice the spine and tail out from under the fillet. Once the fillets are loose, use your knife to cut the belly bones away from the rest of the flesh. Make sure you've rinsed all the blood and goo off your fish bits and now you're ready to cook.